I always thought life at the golf club was perfect. It was a place where the sun set just right, casting golden rays over the perfectly manicured greens. My friends and I would gather on weekends, laughter echoing off the silent lakes, and the clinking of glasses filled with overpriced whiskey added to the ambience. It was a second home, a sanctuary and an escape from the mundane. But it was also a facade, one that hid secrets darker than I ever imagined. I'm Mark, a 36-year-old financial analyst, married to Lisa, my high school sweetheart. We had been together for over a decade, and I believed our love was unshakable. Lisa was beautiful, charming, and the life of every party. She had a way of making everyone feel special, and I often found myself in awe of her. Then there was my father's golf buddy, Tom. He was older, in his late 50s, and had a charisma that made him a staple at the club. With his sun-kissed skin and a laugh that could fill a room, he was the kind of guy you wanted on your side. But it was that same charm that made him dangerous. It was a typical Saturday when everything began to unravel. The sun was shining, the birds were chirping, and I was looking forward to a day of golf with my dad and a few buddies. The last thing I expected was to learn that my world was about to be shattered. As I walked into the club, I noticed Lisa standing by the bar, her laughter mingling with Tom's. At first, it seemed innocent enough, but something about the way they leaned in toward each other stirred an uneasiness in my gut. I brushed it off, attributing it to my overactive imagination. That evening, as I lay in bed, I replayed the day in my mind. The laughter, the way they locked eyes, the lingering touches, it all started to haunt me. I tried to shake the feeling, but it clung to me like a shadow. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my phone and texted Lisa, asking if she could come home early. When she walked through the door, her smile was radiant, but I could see the flicker of something else in her eyes, guilt perhaps. "Hey you," she said, wrapping her arms around me. "How was golf?" "Fine," I replied, my voice betraying my unease. "I saw you with Tom today." Her smile faltered, and in that moment I knew I didn't need to hear the words. My heart was already breaking. "Mark, it's not what you think," she said, stepping back, her hands trembling slightly. "Then what is it?" I asked, my voice rising. "Because I can't shake this feeling that something is wrong." She hesitated, her eyes darting away. "We were just talking. He's a friend, that's all." But her words felt hollow, and the ache in my chest deepened. I needed answers, and I needed them now. "Lisa, please, just tell me the truth." The silence hung between us like a storm cloud, heavy and oppressive. Finally, she broke down. I kissed him, okay? It was a mistake. I swear it didn't mean anything." A mistake. Those words echoed in my mind, twisting like a knife. I felt the world around me blur, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. My heart raced, pounding against my ribs as anger and betrayal coursed through me. How could she do this? How could she betray me? With someone I trusted, someone my father considered a friend. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but instead I stood there, frozen in disbelief. "You kissed him," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "You think that's just a mistake?" As the reality of her betrayal sank in, a cold fury began to take root within me. I had to confront this head-on. I wanted justice, but more importantly, I needed to make her understand the gravity of what she had done. I was no longer the passive husband. I was a man scorned, and I would not let this slide. The golf club, once a sanctuary, would soon become the stage for my revenge. The night stretched on, filled with tension and unspoken words. Lisa's apologies felt like empty echoes in my mind, and the weight of her betrayal hung heavily between us. I spent the hours that followed locked in a whirlwind of emotions, anger, heartbreak, and a simmering resentment that I knew could not be contained. I needed a plan, a way to confront not just Lisa but the man who had violated our marriage. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment I could recall about Tom. The way he laughed, the way he carried himself with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. He was a predator disguised as a friend, and I was determined to make him pay. But how? The thought of exposing this affair to the golf club sent shivers down my spine. It felt extreme, but the more I thought about it, the more it felt like the only way to reclaim my dignity. The next day I walked into the office, but my mind was miles away. I couldn't shake the image of Lisa and Tom together. the intimacy that had been shared behind my back. I tried to focus on work, but I kept finding myself daydreaming about the confrontation that was brewing inside me. I envisioned standing in front of the club members, revealing the truth with all the dramatic flair I could muster. Would they stand by Tom, or would they turn against him? By the time the weekend rolled around, I had devised a plan. I would wait for the monthly club tournament, where all the members gathered for a day of golf and camaraderie. It would be the perfect opportunity to unveil the truth. I could feel the adrenaline pumping through my veins at the thought of finally taking control of the narrative. I wasn't just going to let this go. I was going to make sure everyone knew what kind of man Tom was. As I arrived at the club that Saturday, I felt a mix of excitement and dread. The air was thick with the smell of freshly cut grass and the sound of laughter. I could see Lisa across the parking lot, laughing with the other wives, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit her world. I could feel my heart racing as I approached the registration table. Tom was there, leaning against the table, his usual easy smile plastered on his face. I caught his eye, and for a moment I thought he might sense the fury brewing within me. But he simply smiled and waved, as if nothing were wrong. It took everything in me not to confront him right then and there. Instead, I forced a smile back and took my place in line. The tournament began, and I played as if I were on autopilot, the rhythm of my swing mechanical and detached. Each stroke was a reminder of the anger bubbling beneath the surface. As I walked the course, I watched Tom interact with everyone, the way he charmed the other members, the way they laughed and clapped him on the back. It made my blood boil. By the time we reached the ninth hole, I was ready. It was the perfect moment, everyone gathered around, drinks in hand, spirits high. I could see Lisa standing near Tom, her laughter ringing out like a bell. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest. It was now or never. I walked up to the group, my voice steady but low. "Excuse me, everyone, can I have your attention for a moment?" The chatter died down and heads turned in my direction. I could feel the weight of their gazes, curious and concerned. I locked eyes with Lisa and saw the confusion etched on her face. Tom looked at me, a flicker of concern flashing across his features. "I have something important to share," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "Something that's been weighing heavily on me." Lisa's eyes widened and I could see her beginning to panic. I took a step forward, the crowd parting slightly as I made my way to the center. "I found out that my wife, Lisa, has been having an affair with someone I considered a friend, Tom." Gasps echoed through the crowd, and I watched as shock registered on their faces. Lisa's mouth dropped open, and Tom's expression shifted from surprise to anger. "Mark, you don't mean that," he said, trying to regain control. But I was on a roll now. "Oh, but I do. You think it's just a harmless flirtation. You think it's just a kiss. I assure you it's much more than that." I could see the members shifting uncomfortably, whispers breaking out among them. Lisa's face turned pale and I felt a surge of power. This was no longer just about me. It was about exposing the truth, about ensuring that Tom would never play another round of golf without the weight of his actions hanging over him. "Tom," I said, my voice rising with each word. "You may have taken my wife, but you will not take my dignity. I will make sure everyone here knows exactly what kind of man you are." The crowd was silent, the reality of my words settling in. I felt a mix of triumph and relief, but there was also a heaviness in my chest. This was just the beginning. The silence that followed my revelation was deafening. I stood in the center of the golf course, surrounded by a sea of stunned faces, each one reflecting shock, disbelief, and a myriad of emotions I had never seen before. Lisa looked as if she had been struck by lightning, her mouth opening and closing without words. Tom, on the other hand, went from anger to a desperate attempt to maintain his composure. "Mark, this isn't the place for this," he shouted, his voice strained. "You're making a huge mistake." But it was too late for that. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, and there was no way I would back down now. "A mistake?" I echoed, my voice steady, fueled by righteousness. "You think betraying my trust is a mistake? You think hiding behind a facade of friendship while you sleep with my wife is just a mistake?" The murmurs began to rise among the onlookers, and I could see the shock transforming into outrage, confusion, and pity. I could feel the weight of their judgment, but it was a price I was willing to pay. I wasn't just exposing Tom. I was also forcing Lisa to confront the reality of her actions in front of our community. "Mark, please." Lisa finally found her voice, her eyes pleading. "This isn't how we should handle this. We can talk about it. Talk." I interrupted, incredulous. "You think we can just sit down over coffee and pretend like everything is fine? You shattered my trust, Lisa. You made a mockery of our marriage." Tom stepped forward, trying to defuse the situation, but I wasn't having it. "You don't get to play the victim here, Tom. You knew what you were doing. You knew she was my wife, yet you crossed that line without a second thought." I could see the crowd shifting uneasily, some members exchanging glances, others whispering among themselves. This was the moment I had envisioned, the moment where the truth would hang heavy in the air, forcing everyone to confront the reality of what had transpired. I knew I was risking everything, but it felt liberating to finally take control. "Let's be honest here," I continued, my voice rising above the murmurs. "You've both hurt me in ways I can't even begin to describe. But this isn't just about me. It's about all of you too. How can you trust someone who would betray their closest friend? How can you stand by someone who would hurt you without remorse?" I could see the shock slowly morphing into a mix of sympathy and anger directed at Tom and Lisa. The members of the club who had always celebrated friendship and loyalty were now grappling with the revelation that one of their own had betrayed those very values. At that moment, the club president, an imposing figure named Harold, stepped forward, trying to regain control of the situation. "Mark, I think we need to take a step back. This is a private matter, private." I scoffed, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You think this is a private matter? This is a public betrayal, and I refuse to let it be swept under the rug. If we're going to be a community, then we need to hold each other accountable. This isn't just about my marriage, it's about the integrity of this club." The crowd murmured in agreement, and I could see a few heads nodding. I felt a surge of empowerment, realizing that I wasn't alone in this. I had exposed the truth, and now there was no turning back. Tom's face was flushed with anger, and I could see him struggling to regain his composure. "You'll regret this, Mark," he spat, his voice low and threatening. "You're ruining lives." "Your life is already ruined, Tom," I shot back. "You just don't realize it yet. The truth has a way of catching up with people like you." Lisa stood there, a mixture of shame and anger etched across her face. "You think this is going to fix things?" she yelled, her voice trembling. "You think exposing this will somehow make it better?" I shook my head, feeling a mix of sadness and resolve. "I'm not trying to fix anything, Lisa. I'm trying to reclaim my dignity. I'm trying to ensure that everyone knows who you both really are. I deserve that much." As I looked around, I saw the members of the club processing the situation. Some were angry, some were sympathetic, and others were simply shocked. I had ignited a firestorm, and there was no going back. But in that moment I felt a sense of clarity. I was done being the victim. The golf club, once a sanctuary, had become a battleground. As the whispers grew louder, I could feel the weight of the world lifting off my shoulders, replaced by a new sense of purpose. I had taken a stand, and now it was time to see how the fallout would play out. "Mark, let's talk about this privately," Harold urged again, but I held up a hand to silence him. I wasn't done yet. "Everyone deserves to know the truth," I said, my voice steady. "And believe me, this is just the beginning." With those words, I turned away from the crowd, feeling a mix of triumph and devastation. I had exposed the affair, but the battle was far from over. I would navigate the aftermath, and I would make sure that neither Tom nor Lisa would ever forget the consequences of their betrayal. The fallout from that day was immediate and overwhelming. The golf club, once a place of camaraderie and laughter, had transformed into a hotbed of gossip and judgment. I had thrown a grenade into the center of our community, and now everyone was left to pick up the pieces. As the weeks went by, I found myself at the center of a whirlwind, the aftermath of my confrontation swirling around me like a storm. In the days that followed the revelation, I became a pariah in the club. Members were divided, some supported me, while others condemned my actions. Conversations halted as I entered rooms, and whispers followed me like a shadow. I had expected some backlash, but I hadn't anticipated the sheer intensity of the division. The once unified group was now a battlefield, with alliances shifting and friendships fracturing. Lisa tried to reach out, but I rebuffed her attempts at reconciliation. Each time she called or texted, I felt a surge of anger and betrayal. How could she think I would simply forgive her? The hurt was too raw, too fresh. I needed space, time to process the enormity of what had happened. I found solace in the company of friends who supported me, who offered a listening ear and a shoulder to cry on. Tom, on the other hand, became increasingly isolated. The members who had once laughed with him now looked at him with disdain. I watched as he attended club events, trying to maintain his composure, but the shame was palpable. He had lost the respect of many, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction in that. The man who had betrayed me was now facing the consequences of his actions, and it was a bitter pill to swallow. One evening, as I sat at the bar nursing a drink, Harold approached me. He was the club president, the one who had tried to mediate during my confrontation. I could see the concern etched on his face as he slid onto the stool next to me. "Mark, I wanted to talk to you about everything that's happened," he began, his tone serious. "Is there something left to say?" I replied, my voice laced with bitterness. "I've said my piece, and I think the truth is out there for everyone to see." Harold sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I understand that you're hurt, and I support your decision to speak out. But this has affected the club in ways we didn't anticipate. Members are leaving, and it's causing a rift that might not heal." I turned to face him, my expression hardening. "You think I care about the club's reputation right now? I've lost everything I thought I knew about my life. I'm not going to let them sweep this under the rug." "I get that, but there are consequences to every action. You need to think about what you want moving forward," he said, his voice firm yet compassionate. "What I want is to see Tom and Lisa held accountable. They destroyed my marriage and my trust. I can't just let that go," I replied, the anger bubbling to the surface again. Harold nodded, understanding the weight of my words. "You're right, they should be held accountable, but you also need to consider your own future. Do you want to be the guy who becomes defined by this scandal?" I paused, letting his words sink in. It was a valid point. I had become so consumed by the desire for revenge that I hadn't thought about what my life would look like after the dust settled. I didn't want to be the man who was known only for the affair that destroyed his marriage. I wanted to reclaim my life, to rebuild it on my own terms, but how could I do that when the betrayal loomed so large? As the weeks turned into months, I began to see the toll the exposure had taken on both Tom and Lisa. Tom's reputation was in shambles, and he had become a ghost at the club, avoiding gatherings and playing only when he had no choice. Lisa, on the other hand, was trying to salvage her friendships, but the whispers followed her like a storm cloud. I could see the pain in her eyes, the realization that her actions had consequences beyond just our marriage. One evening, I found myself at a charity dinner hosted by the club. I hadn't planned on attending, but a few friends had convinced me to come out and show my face. As I entered the room, I felt the tension immediately. Conversations halted, and I could sense the judgment in the air. I was the elephant in the room, the focal point of hushed discussions and sideways glances. As I made my way to the bar, I spotted Lisa across the room. She was talking to a few of the other wives, trying to fit in, but the discomfort was palpable. I could see her forced smile and the way her eyes darted around, searching for something, maybe a sense of normalcy or understanding. But it was Tom who drew my attention next. He stood at the back, nursing a drink, his face a mask of anger and humiliation. I could sense he was struggling with the fallout, and a part of me felt a flicker of empathy. Yet it was quickly overshadowed by the anger that had fueled my actions for so long. I approached the bar, my mind racing. I couldn't ignore the reality that we were all trapped in this web of betrayal together. As I stood there, I realized that I had a choice to make. I could continue to feed into the cycle of anger and revenge, or I could take a step back and start to rebuild. The moment of clarity hit me hard. I didn't want to be consumed by this affair any longer. I wanted to reclaim my life, to move forward without the shadow of betrayal looming over me. But first I needed to confront Tom and Lisa one last time to find closure in this mess we had all created. As the evening wore on, I made my way to where Lisa stood, her smile faltering as she saw me approach. "Mark," she began, but I cut her off. "Can we talk?" I asked, my tone firm but calm. She nodded, and I led her to a quieter corner of the room. "I need you to understand something," I said, my voice steady. "What you did hurt me more than I can express, but I don't want to continue living in this chaos. We need to find a way to move forward for both of our sakes." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I saw the woman I had fallen in love with, the one who had laughed and danced with me in the early days of our relationship. "I'm so sorry, Mark. I never meant for it to get this far. I made a terrible mistake and I can't take it back." "I know," I replied, my heart softening just a bit. "But we can't keep dragging this out. I want to be free of this pain. I want to rebuild my life, and I hope you can do the same." She nodded, her expression earnest. "I want that too. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right." As we spoke, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. This was the first step toward healing, a chance to move beyond the betrayal. But I also knew that I still had one more confrontation to face: Tom. I had to find closure with him as well, but that was a conversation for another time. For now, I was ready to take the next step in my journey, one that would lead me away from the shadows of betrayal and toward a new beginning. The charity dinner ended without further incident, but the conversations I had with Lisa lingered in my mind like a half-remembered dream. I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders, but the reality was that the confrontation with Tom still loomed ahead. It was an unresolved knot in my gut, one that I had to untangle before I could truly move forward. Over the next few days, I wrestled with how to approach Tom. I wanted to confront him, to make him understand the devastation his actions had caused, but I also knew that anger alone wouldn't lead to any real resolution. I needed to find the right moment, a time when we could talk without the surrounding chaos of the club's judgment. Eventually, I decided to invite him for a drink. I figured that if I could get him alone, it might be easier to have an honest conversation. I sent him a text, not expecting much, but to my surprise he agreed. We arranged to meet at a quiet bar on the outskirts of town, far from the prying eyes of our golf club community. The day of our meeting, I felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. I arrived first, taking a seat at a dimly lit corner table, my heart racing as I waited for him to arrive. It felt surreal to think that I was about to sit down with the man who had caused me so much pain, but I knew I had to face him. This was my chance to reclaim my narrative, to express my anger and hurt, but also to seek closure. When Tom walked in, he looked different, more haggard than I remembered. The confidence that had once radiated from him seemed to have faded, replaced by a sense of defeat. He spotted me and approached, his expression a mixture of defiance and uncertainty. "Mark," he said, taking a seat across from me, "thanks for agreeing to meet." "Let's just get to it," I replied, cutting straight to the point. "I don't want to waste time pretending everything is fine." Tom nodded, the weight of my words hanging in the air. "I know I messed up. I wish I could take it back." "Do you?" I challenged, my voice low but firm. "Because it didn't seem like a mistake when you were doing it. You knew she was my wife." He looked down at the table, avoiding my gaze. "I was stupid. I got caught up in the moment and I didn't think about the consequences. I never wanted to hurt you." "Yet you did," I shot back, anger bubbling to the surface again. "You destroyed not only my marriage but also the trust I had in you as a friend. You were supposed to be someone I could count on." "I know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can't express how sorry I am. I've lost everything because of my actions and I don't know how to fix it." I leaned back in my chair, feeling a mix of satisfaction and empathy. "You're right, you have lost everything. But I'm not here to fix you. I'm here to find some closure for myself. I need to know that you understand the impact of what you did." Tom looked up, his eyes filled with remorse. "I do understand. I wish I could undo it all, but I know that's not possible. I've faced the consequences of my actions and I'm still dealing with the fallout. I've lost respect, friends, and my reputation. I'm not the man I used to be." "That's not enough," I replied, my voice steady. "You need to do better. You need to take responsibility for your actions and not just wallow in guilt. You owe it to Lisa, to me, and to yourself to be better." He nodded. slowly the weight of my words seemingly sinking in. You're right, I need to change to be someone who doesn't hurt others. I've been selfish and it's time for me to start making amends. And how do you plan to do that? I pressed, curious about his intentions. You can't just say it, you need to show it. You need to prove that you're willing to change. I'll do whatever it takes, he said, his voice stronger now. I'll reach out to Lisa and apologize, and I'll make sure everyone knows that I take full responsibility for what happened. I'll make it right. I studied him for a moment, weighing his words. There was sincerity in his voice, and for the first time I felt a flicker of hope that maybe he could change. I hope you mean that, Tom, because if you don't, you'll continue to lose everything you've built. We talked for a while longer, discussing the repercussions of the affair and the changes we both needed to make in our lives. It felt cathartic, almost like a weight lifting from my shoulders. I realized that, although I had exposed the truth, I didn't want to be consumed by bitterness and anger forever. I wanted to move forward to reclaim my life and my happiness. As we finished our drinks, I stood up, feeling a sense of closure I hadn't anticipated. I hope you find a way to make things right, I said, offering him a nod of understanding. But remember, actions speak louder than words. He nodded back, a look of determination on his face. I won't forget this conversation, Mark. I'll do better. As I walked out of the bar, I felt lighter, as if I had finally closed a chapter in my life. I didn't condone what Tom had done, and I knew that the scars would take time to heal, but I was ready to move forward. I wanted to rebuild my life, to find joy in the little things again, and to surround myself with people who valued honesty and loyalty. I had taken a significant step towards healing, but I also knew that my journey was far from over. I needed to focus on my own growth, on rediscovering who I was outside of the shadow of betrayal. It was time to reclaim my life, one day at a time. The weeks that followed my confrontation with Tom were filled with a sense of cautious optimism. I had taken a stand, confronted my demons, and sought closure in a way I never thought possible. But the aftermath of the affair still loomed large, and I knew I had to focus on my own healing process. I took some time off work, using the opportunity to reflect on my life and the choices that had led me here. I spent hours walking through parks, rediscovering hobbies I had neglected, and reconnecting with friends who had stood by me through the chaos. I joined a local running club, finding solace in the rhythm of my feet hitting the pavement. It felt good to sweat out the anger and heartache, to feel my body moving and my mind clearing. Lisa and I had agreed to meet occasionally, navigating the delicate balance of our new reality. She was making efforts to rebuild her life as well, attending therapy and seeking to understand the roots of her actions. Each time we met, there was an underlying tension, but there was also a glimmer of hope. We talked about our past, our mistakes, and our aspirations for the future. It was painful but necessary. I could see her sincerity, her desire to make amends, and while I wasn't ready to forgive her entirely, I could sense a shift in our dynamic. One evening, we met for coffee at a quaint little cafe downtown, a neutral ground where we could talk without the weight of our past hanging over us. As I sipped my drink, I looked at her, taking in the way her features had softened since our initial confrontation. "Are you holding up?" I asked, genuinely curious. "I'm working on it," she replied, her voice steady. "I've been going to therapy and it's helping me face some of the issues I've buried for so long. I'm learning to understand why I made the choices I did." "I'm glad to hear that," I said, my heart heavy with mixed emotions. "I want to see you succeed, Lisa, but it's going to take time." She nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I know I hurt you deeply and I can't change the past. But I want to be a better person, for myself. And for you, I want to earn your trust back, even if it takes years." "I appreciate that," I said, feeling a flicker of warmth in my chest. "But trust isn't something that can be rebuilt overnight. It's going to take consistent effort." "I'm committed to doing the work," she promised, her voice earnest. "I want to show you that I can be the partner you deserve." As we talked, I felt a small sense of hope beginning to blossom. I wasn't ready to jump back into a relationship with her, but I could see the potential for growth. Perhaps one day, we could find a way to coexist without the weight of betrayal hanging over us. The golf club, however, remained a complicated space. Many members had chosen sides and the atmosphere was still tense. I avoided the club for a while, focusing on my own healing, but I knew I couldn't stay away forever. Eventually, I decided it was time to return, to face the people who had witnessed the fallout of my life. When I finally stepped through the doors of the club again, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. The familiar smell of fresh grass and polished wood hit me like a wave, and I could hear the distant sounds of laughter and chatter. I walked through the lounge, scanning the room for familiar faces. Some members greeted me with hesitant smiles, while others averted their eyes, clearly unsure of how to approach me. I spotted Harold at the bar and made my way over. "Hey, Mark," he said, his expression warm but cautious. "It's good to see you back." "Thanks, Harold. I've been taking some time for myself," I replied, my voice steady. "I'm ready to move forward." "I'm glad to hear that. We've missed having you around," he said, genuine concern in his tone. "Things have been tense since, well, you know." "Yeah, I can imagine," I said, glancing around the room. "But I don't want to dwell on the past. I want to focus on rebuilding, not just my life, but the sense of community we had." As I spoke, I felt a sense of resolve wash over me. I was no longer the man defined by betrayal. I was reclaiming my identity, my friendships, and my sense of self. I was determined to move forward, to create a life that was meaningful and fulfilling. Over the next few weeks, I began to reconnect with some of the club members. I attended events, played a few rounds of golf, and slowly began to rebuild my presence within the community. It was challenging, but each small step felt like a victory. I was no longer the victim. I was a man forging a new path. As for Tom, he had taken my words to heart. I heard through the grapevine that he was making genuine efforts to change, attending counseling and working on repairing his relationships. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction knowing that he was facing his demons, but I also recognized that my journey was separate from his. I could only control my own actions and reactions. One evening, as I was leaving the club after a round of golf, I bumped into Tom in the parking lot. He looked different, more grounded, perhaps. "Hey, Mark," he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "Can we talk?" I hesitated for a moment but realized I had nothing to lose. "Sure," I replied, crossing my arms. "What's on your mind?" "I just wanted to say thank you for that conversation we had at the bar," he began, looking genuinely grateful. "It opened my eyes to a lot of things. I've been working on myself, trying to understand what led me to make those choices. I'm committed to being a better person." "I hope you mean that," I said, my tone cautious but firm. "It's going to take time for people to trust you again." "I know, and I'm prepared for it," he replied, his sincerity evident. "I just wanted to let you know that I'm trying. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to be better." As we stood there, I realized that I was no longer consumed by anger or resentment. I could see Tom was genuinely trying to change, and while I didn't know if we could ever be friends again, I appreciated his efforts. "Just remember that actions speak louder than words," I said, echoing my earlier sentiment. He nodded, and for the first time I felt a sense of closure. We parted ways, and I walked to my car, feeling lighter than I had in months. Reflecting on everything that had transpired, I realized that I had come a long way. I had faced betrayal, heartbreak, and chaos, but I had also emerged stronger and more resilient. Life would never be the same, but I was ready to embrace the future, whatever it held. As I drove home that evening, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I was ready to rebuild my life, to focus on the things that truly mattered: my health, my friendships, and my own happiness. I had learned valuable lessons about trust, love, and the importance of accountability. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was prepared to navigate it with clarity and strength. I had taken the first steps toward healing, and I was determined to create a life filled with integrity, joy, and hopefully new beginnings. With that thought, I turned up the music in my car and drove into the sunset, ready for whatever came next.